All right, here we are live. Welcome everybody, trickling in. Let us know how the sound is. Say something in the chat. Let us know you're here. And we'll get rolling here in just a minute. But so tonight we got, I don't know, like I think there's a little bit of an argument, like whether it's Minnesota zone or Wisconsin zone, Bob Downey, like it's debatable. What would you say to that? Are you a Minnesotan or a Wisconsinite?
I would have to say I'm a Minnesotan, but I think there's big confusion on that whole deal just because I live like 10 minutes across the border now. But I grew up in the Twin Cities area and cut my teeth fishing in Minnesota.
Sure.
So
absolutely. And so I'll give so Bob and I have known each other, I guess, I mean, like we're not like, I can pretend like we're best friends, but we've been acquaintances for probably, I don't know, almost 10 years now. Something like that.
Yeah, I would say so. I feel like I've at least been competing in the TOCs for Bass Nation for 10 years or so now. But yeah.
And like I remember like back when we didn't have like 100 social sites, like probably on Facebook or something like that. Bob reached out to me when he was in college looking for one of his first bass belts, asking me about when I had just gotten my Bass Cat, which was probably like 8+ years ago. So that's right around that time. And kind of chatted about some of the local lakes and about bass cats and things like that. And we fished against each other in a lot of kind of level tournaments in Minnesota. So, and then, so, you know, kind of been cordial and said hi, but I don't think we've ever really hung out by any means. So it's cool to have you on here and get to know a little bit more about you and share some of your experiences with YouTube and everything else.
Yeah, I appreciate you having me on. I mean, we didn't grow up, or at least I didn't grow up too far from where, I don't know if you grew up in South Metro, but I mean, I fished a lot of those lakes that you fished the last 15, 20 years growing up. And that's kind of where I got my start, was in that Eaton area and down into Lakeville. Kind of cut my teeth bass fishing there. So.
Yeah, I grew up on the north side, so like when I was young, I was like Coon and Ham Lake and Turtle and like the Lynn Chisago lakes. But then after college, I settled down and we bought a house down in Lakeville. So I've been here since like early 2000, 15+ years. So.
Yeah, it's a good area. Those lakes can be good at times. They can be a little frustrating too, but.
Yeah, I only wish that I would have started venturing down to Faribault sooner than I had. Like, there's a lot of good, sneaky stuff down that way. So,
is there? I haven't explored much down there myself.
There's more than Marion if you go south.
Sure. Okay. Yeah.
But
I hear you.
Bob, you're an Elite Series rookie this year. Qualified through the Central Opens last year, right? So why don't you just give us a little high-level background and tell us a little bit about the 2019 season and how you got here.
Yeah, so I decided to jump into the Opens last year. Mainly the Mississippi River kind of piqued my interest a little bit. One of the tournaments was going there, and I've got some experience there. Not a ton, but enough to feel like I'd maybe jump in it and see how I would do against those guys. And my kind of thought process was if I was going to do that, I may as well jump in the first one down at Toledo Bend and just see how it goes, and not really expecting a whole lot. And fortunate to do well on that one, and kind of just rolled from there into Smith Lake and had a good finish there. The third one was actually on the river, and the one I had planned to do from the beginning. Had a pretty poor day the first day of the river, and kind of thought that was going to be the last Open I fished, and then had a good second day. Got a check, and then entered that last one on Grand Lake and ended up winning the whole thing. So that kind of catapulted me into the Elite Series, and then qualified for the Classic with that win. And, 2019 was just one of those seasons where, everything kind of just went right. And, you launch the boat, you kind of just have the confidence that you're going to find them and catch them. And that's not always the case. I just got on a good run and got fortunate and had a little bit of a break. And so was able to qualify for the Elite, and we are four tournaments in. We got this year, so I'm quite happy.
So with the Classic, you've got 5 of your 10 pro level events under your belt this year. So really, coming up, you kind of were hoping to what's the word? You were hoping to just get in on lacrosse, right? Kind of cherry pick lacrosse, and you kind of ended up adding one here and there, and things kind of snowballed. The next thing you know, you found yourself with a win and an Elite Series invite.
Yeah, it was quite the deal. You know, super blessed to have had that season. You know, I mean, I did not expect it, to be honest. It had always been a dream of mine to try the Opens in college, really. You know, I had aspirations right out of college, and then got a decent job and kind of got into that and enjoyed doing that. And but still kind of had it in the back of my mind that I always wanted to try it. And so this year, you know, the stars kind of aligned and gave it a shot, and it worked out. And I'm still working to this day, along with trying to do the Elite Series. So it's kind of nice to still have somewhat of a stable income while I'm doing it. But
which we talked about that a little bit earlier. It's kind of like a blessing and a little bit of like a double-edged sword. Right? So like you got the stability, you still got benefits, you still got, you know, you're, you know, mostly a full-time job. Hope some special, maybe some unpaid time off here and there. But again, when you're not at a tournament, you're back on the 40, 50-hour grind for the most part, and not free scouting other lakes. You're not spending your time in the water just honing your craft. Like we talked about earlier, a lot of these guys are just hanging out in New York, hanging out on Cayuga, Onondaga, right? And they're just whacking smallmouth for the next 2 weeks or whatever, or working on their skills, on their electronics, and you're probably making more money than they are right now, but it kind of goes both ways.
Yeah, for sure. I mean, I still try and stay out on the water as much as I possibly can when I'm back home, but it's not nearly as much as I would be if I wasn't working a different job. So yeah, there's a give and take there for sure. You know, you're on one hand have somewhat of a stable income, which is good, but on the other hand, you're not on the water as much as some of these guys.
But you're not living off ramen noodles and black beans because you didn't have free time. And maxing out your credit card, right? So
right. So that part's not all bad either.
Right. That's cool. So we kind of talked when you got the invite, was there much debate, or did you like, I got to do this? Like were you kind of like seeing what came with like Rapala and St. Croix and Bass Cat, or were you like, I'm just going to do it and figure it out? What's kind of your mentality?
You know, there was some debate. I followed this sport long enough to kind of know the ups and downs of it and how difficult it can be. And but at the same time, being that it had been a dream of mine forever, and knowing how hard it is to qualify through the Opens, I felt like if I didn't at least give this a shot for a year or two, that I would sit back and probably regret it in 5-10 years. So that part kind of just overruled everything else. And so there was definitely some debate and a lot of thought that went into it, but ultimately, kind of my dream to see how it would go.
Did you work things out with your employer before you made the decision? Like that?
Yeah, actually, like going into, I had like open conversations with them even during the Opens last year. Like after the Mississippi River, I think I was sitting like 7th in the points, and that's when it kind of became real. So I had a few like sit down, let's go up to lunch, kind of talk through some things to see like if this actually happens, would I be able to do this? And I can't say enough about my boss and current employer. I mean, they've been unbelievably flexible with me to the point where I don't know if I'd be able to do it if they weren't, that flexible. I wouldn't be able to. So that opportunity and kind of almost kind of a perfect scenario, at least to give it a try for a year or two, I had to take a shot at it.
Sure. And do you feel like if you would have, let's say you just would have top 5 or top 10 that grand and didn't win it, is it a different conversation, or the fact that you like won, and that gave you a nice cash bump for your fishing account, or was that not a big factor, do you think?
Oh no, that was a big deal. Yeah, I mean, I would have had to use a good chunk of my personal savings to be able to do it this year if I hadn't won, last year. So, or found more sponsor support really. So basically was able to use that plus the guaranteed classic earnings and on a bankroll this year on sponsor support. And I'm going to have to do well, this year to be able to do it next year comfortably too. So, that's part of this game. I think it's been like that since the beginning. To get your start in it, it's not easy at all from a financial standpoint. So,
and plus, it gives you the confidence. I mean, when you won it, it makes you think, well, maybe I don't suck. Maybe what I mean. Like, if I can win an Open, I should be able to cash some checks in the elites, right? Like,
yeah, you would think so. And then you bomb in Florida at the first one, and then this sport is such a roller coaster that. But yeah, you're right. I mean, it does give you some confidence that, especially when there's a bunch of locals there too in Oklahoma, and you're able to compete with them. It at least gives you some confidence that you might be able to compete under certain conditions, anyways, or certain scenarios.
Yeah, I mean, a lot of people will say that an Open can be harder to win than an Elite Series event. Now, I think you can take it both ways, but, right? You've got literally 50 to 70, of the best anglers in the world versus, almost 200 of the best anglers, not in the world, but on that, like there's going to be 50 of them on that pond that are considered like, heavy local favorites, right? So,
yeah, no, I would agree with that. The Open competition is pretty stout. You got a lot of guys like me that were, they're hungry and they're trying to get in. And then, like you said, you got probably 30 or 40 of the best locals that are jackpot in the event. So, and then you got, maybe 10 to 15 touring pros that'll jump in those things too. So,
absolutely.
They're definitely pretty tough competition.
So I just want to, guys, if you can, like and hit that like button, share this stream on social if you can. We're going to be getting into some pretty deep details on Bob's successes and challenges, and I think it's going to be really good because he's at we'll talk about some of the ups in 2019 and what worked and went well. We're going to talk about some of the struggles this year, and I think from my perspective, there's going to be a lot to learn because when you see a Brandon Polnick or a Seth Biter or a Paul Mueller crushing it, when they go to a tournament and they make good decisions and they find them and it works out, that's great. That's one thing. And there's some things you can learn that. But I think there's an opportunity for us all to learn a little bit based on and I don't know all the details behind this. That's what we're going to dig into. I think your average angler has more potential to learn from someone getting into these details. And, when guys have, let's call it a mediocre season, they don't necessarily get a lot of coverage. And so you don't really find out the nuggets and details behind this. So I think there'll be a lot of interesting stuff. So I think there's going to be a good opportunity to ask a lot of questions. So I just want to make sure you guys take the time, hit that button, thumbs up, so we get a few more people in here. So, and then obviously you get to watch the replay too. But I want as many people to be able to kind of participate in this because I think it's going to be a really good conversation. So
yeah.
So these two questions are really similar from Sycamore Outdoors. He says, what was the biggest hurdle when deciding to go for the chance to go competitive fishing? And SmackDown says, what is the single best challenge of your fishing career? So I think those are both related. And maybe you can kind of cover those high level.
Yeah. I mean, Rich kind of touched on it a little bit in terms of jumping to the next level. I think confidence is always a big deal with that, whether you're jumping into a adult club or you're going up to the state POC for the Bass Nation or you're jumping into higher end team tournaments and then maybe BFLs and then opens, every step of the way for me has always been can I compete at that next level type of deal. And that's a big hurdle from a mental standpoint to try and get over. And that's kind of where I'm at right now with the Elite Series, to be honest. I mean, that's, as a rookie, you don't really know until you get out there and fish for a season or two. And so that's always a big challenge, the mental side. It's no different than any other high-end professional sport. The mental part of it is a big deal. beyond that, I was fortunate to win that tournament and have the classic earnings to be able to finance this year. Without that, I think that honestly is maybe one of the biggest hurdles that holds guys back. The other part, this sort of gypsy lifestyle, I guess, isn't always for everybody either. I look at myself as someone that had a good year in the Opens, but there are a lot of guys that are just as good as me that are local that just choose not to live this lifestyle, and so that's sometimes can be a hurdle or a challenge for guys too, is they just simply don't want to live that sort of lifestyle. So the traveling part of it is definitely a hurdle for some people. Other people don't think twice about it, but it's something I'm getting used to. I've got a camper that makes me get a little bit more comfortable on the road instead of being in hotels all the time. So that was kind of one thing I had to think hard about how I was going to travel on the road. But I mean, that's more than just a single deal, I guess. But for me, if I had to pick one, it'd definitely be a confidence thing.
Yeah, and I think there's when you jump up, especially to this level, I think there's two things, right? Can I compete against these guys? And then the unknown of going to waters you're not comfortable with, to me, is a big deal. And now you got a little bit at the Opens, but it is like, even like, it's like the first time you go up to Vermilion, or the first time you go to the Mississippi River, or the first time you go, to like, you start stretching your boundaries. You always kind of feel that uncomfort. That's good. It's what challenges you. It kind of makes it fun. So you travel. Oh, go ahead.
No, 100%. I mean, like you follow would be a good example. I mean, fishing brush piles, we just don't do that around here. And so I had to learn how to do it that week. I didn't do it well. So I ended up fishing shallow most of the time. But just little things like that. Like, you learn different intricacies of different lakes throughout the season. But
are you traveling solo, or are you hanging with anybody, or?
I'm on the road solo. I kind of work with Caleb Kufal out of Milwaukee area. We got to know each other really well in the Opens last year. We randomly would stay at the same campgrounds, like unplanned. We happened to always like stay right next to each other, and had a real similar path. Like his first year in the Opens was last year. He won a tournament, qualified for the Classic. We're both, I would consider ourselves like true rookies. Like we've never had tour experience on the FLW tour necessarily. And so we talk every day, in practice in the tournament, and, kind of bounce ideas off each other, kind of help out each other a little bit. And, Caleb's a phenomenal fisherman. If anybody follows any of the tournament scene in Wisconsin, or at least around Milwaukee or the BFLs, I mean, he is consistently at the top, or in the 5 to 10%. He's already had some success in the Classic and this year on the Elite Series. So good guy to know. Super great person off the water too. So we kind of gel well together.
You gotta stop giving him all your juice. He's cash.
I know, man.
Are you sure he's telling you everything?
Right? Yeah. No, he's good. He's very well accomplished locally, and has kind of transferred that into the national level too.
Yeah, I know. My first experience with Caleb, one season that I fished the full season of BFLs in the Great Lakes Division, and I finished like, I don't know, 5th or 7th in the points, which I was pretty proud of as my first year.
Yeah. That's good.
Like, and Cash had like a top 5 and a top 10, and I was definitely in the conversation to be able. I mean, I mathematically could have won the OI in the Super Tournament, go my way up. But and that was like first of his 2 years back to back, or second. I remember it was one of the back to back years that he won the OI points, and he really hasn't even fished a full season. But since then, so yeah, he's very good for sure.
Yeah, extremely good. Wherever he goes, really.
Yeah. So Connor says, what would you do differently to get to the elites? Well, there's really only 2 paths to the elites, right?
Yeah, right. Yeah, I think Bass Nation or the Opens.
Right. I mean, technically you could do the team trail and then win the Classic, but that's kind of a real shot.
Yeah. That'd be hard. Yeah, that might be harder than the Bass Nation, but.
And I guess, I mean, you kind of were fishing the Bass Nation for the last decade before you. I mean, you were you've made a couple regionals, right?
Yeah, I think I'm qualified for 3 of them in the last like 8-9 years or something like that.
So, and I've been doing that as well. It's hard. I mean, it's hard to get past that regional level. Like it's once, but that's a tough path.
It's really tough.
It's really tough. But like you can kind of get. I feel like it's a little easier to get on a run in the opens, like you did.
Oh,
easier, but like shorter time frame. It's more expensive to play. It's different, but.
Yeah, you can get on a run like I did last year, and you know, with the Bass Nation, the way it's set up, it's broken up year to year.
Like 6 months between tournaments or a year. It's like it's hard.
And
it's like start over. Like
and I think Minnesota is one of the hardest states to even get out of. Personally, I mean, you talk to a lot of other states that don't have the participation that Minnesota has, or at least had when I don't know what the numbers are looking like this year, but
it's pretty similar. I mean, when you compare us to like South Dakota and Iowa and places like the Northeast states and like they have really, but I wouldn't compare us to like Alabama or Texas.
No,
maybe 5,000. So.
Yeah, that's true. But I just always thought, I mean, Minnesota, there's a lot of good sticks in this state. That are consistent towards the top.
My little girl's she's limping coming out of goalie training for hockey.
I'm a
10-year-old that wants to be an ice goalie. So how important is it to have success at lower level tournaments for jumping to higher levels? I think it's honestly, I don't know about you. Like,
I think it's super important. Yeah. I mean, I guess like my progression, I started in a junior club when I was like 14 and then moved to an adult club and then college and then like team tournaments and BFLs and Bass Nation state tournaments before I ever jumped in the opens. And I tried to have some level of success in each one of those before I would kind of move on to the next. And, you know, there's, and a lot of people say it, but there's just not many shortcuts. You know, you kind of got to have success at each level to have the confidence in yourself to be able to compete at the next one.
I know there's a lot of people with money that just keep moving up, and they don't care about confidence or success. But
yeah, I mean, you can certainly enter the opens if you want, if you got the financial capability to do it, and you know, you may or may not succeed. I don't know, but that was another thing with me jumping into the opens. I never wanted to do it and strain myself financially, and I was kind of finding a place with my career that I could do it without really killing myself, and got fortunate in the ones that I did.
Yeah, absolutely. Follow up says, question for both of us: if you were to give someone just starting fishing tournaments a piece of advice, what would that be?
I mean, for me, preparation is a big deal, and that kind of starts with organization in my boat, for myself at least, and kind of research on the lake. Some people for me, I love to be organized. Other people, it works other ways. Like I know, like I'm like Seth, you know, you look at his boat, he's got stuff all over the place, but obviously that works for him, you know. And so you kind of got to find what works best for you in that regard. But for me, I always try and take care of things that I can take care of off the water. So when I'm in tournament mode, you know, during the tournament hours, I'm not really having to think about anything else. But and research is kind of somewhat of a big deal for me. I don't like to get like so dialed into the lake where I'm like not relying on my own abilities, I guess, because I've been burned doing that before. But I definitely like to have a general understanding of areas and kind of the certain weights that it's to do well and all that sort of thing.
Yeah, I guess all good stuff. And for me, I'm definitely more I probably leave a little more Seth. There's definitely like a bit of organized chaos in my boat, like where stuff is, and like, but it's not like meticulous by any means. But my boat's a little older, and it's not super clean, and it's got some scratches in it. But you know, like before I was out on Leech last weekend, I tightened down all the screws. I checked all the gallons and the trolling motor, and I know my boat's not like 100%, but I know what to do with my boat. You know what I mean? Like if something wonky things, but I know how to work around. You know what I mean? Like there's not much down with a screwdriver or a roll of electrical tape on my boat, right? So I think it is, you know, it's all over the board. And I would say have fun doing it, and like
true,
do it to get in that competitive mode and have fun. And there should be a little bit of stress or anxiety in the tournament. That's what the competition part. But you shouldn't let it get debilitating for you, right? Like you should feel a healthy amount of competitive stress without letting it take you over where you're like spun out and breaking stuff, and like you got to find that zone that works for you.
It's totally true, and I'm trying to find that balance, to be honest, on the Elite Series this year. I mean, I've kind of had that, or been able to find that balance in other levels, and I've gotten better at it in the last couple events. But like in Florida, you know, when one thing went wrong, it was like a train wreck. And you know, I look at guys that are veterans in the sport, and you know, their ability to stay on an even keel and like not let that get to them is, you know, way beyond what a rookie can do in most cases. And I think that's why they take a couple years as a rookie.
Avoiding the snowball is a big deal, right? Like you're gonna lose fish, you're gonna break stuff, mechanical issues are gonna happen. Things happen. It's just like life, and you got to be able to like pivot, make the most of it. Like you know, I can maybe win now, but I can still catch one more fish and get some points, or like you didn't have to make the best of the situation. Like
no excuses.
That's a skill that takes time to learn in tournaments for sure. And
and if something goes wrong, like don't dwell on that, and don't like keep telling yourself that's the reason you're not catching them. Like you gotta just move past that and get after it and keep going.
And like the wind blows, the fish aren't biting here. Well, that happened. Now it's not like you can't let that dictate the rest of your tournament day or the rest of your week. Like it's like, okay, that happened. Now what? Like let's move on.
Totally. Easier said than done, but I'm trying to get better at that.
Yeah, cool. Hey, welcome, Tom. Tanner says, "You got any tips for big bass on gull?"
On gull, I think you're probably better on gull than I am, but I don't know. I mean, we had one tournament out there in the fall a couple years ago at TOC. I think we were leading after the first day, and we were just fishing weed lines, like heavy Texas rigs, kind of deeper coontail type stuff. But I know they can get up shallow in the summer. We were there like the first week in October, and I think Josh Douglas and Joel Ward ended up in that thing, and I think they caught him like in 5 feet or less on a jig.
I would say two things: like either get out and find that deep coontail clumps, right? That isolated coontail. That's a good bet. Or you can catch good ones shallow, like boat docks, reeds, things like that. But that's a little more of one here, one there. So like if I was going to take a tournament, I would have some offshore spots where I thought I could catch 13, 14, 15, 16 pounds. And then once I hit that kind of plateau of the spot, then I would just
get up shallow.
Docks, reeds, fish the wind, follow the wind. There's a tip. Like wind is really important on gull. Like you don't want debilitating wind, but then fish, especially for shallow, will typically react to a little good walleye.
I've been more of I stay in that lower section for the most part. I know you guys do catch them up in the smaller lakes at times, but I don't have as much experience up in those lakes. Yeah,
a little bit. And like to me, the upper lakes are much more feast or famine. You're either going to go up there and catch 18 pounds, or you're going to come back with 3 pounds. Like, and then it's like that idle in those slow wake zones. Unless you like, if you only have 1 or 2 spots up there and they don't go, it's really tough to recover from that. It's like locking and not catching them on the river. Like it's. So this one's all for is Mojo Bass a lot better than the Bass X?
I wish I had a better answer for you. I honestly haven't fished the Bass X. I've looked at it, and I've looked at it in a store, but I'm sorry, I don't have a great answer. I know both. I know the Mojo series is very popular. I mean, it's a good series of rods at a good price point, but I don't know much about the Bass X line of their rods, to be honest.
Yeah. So Sycamore, there's nothing wrong with just getting in there and having fun. So it just all depends on what your level of, if you're a person that's just fine giving it your best and going out there and whatever happens. But if you've got that, because like I said, it all comes down to that balance of like what's important to you and how important it is. So
yeah, absolutely. I think tournament fishing for everybody means something different. And if it just means you're going to go out and have a Wednesday nighter each week with a bunch of buddies, that's totally fine. I mean, there's nothing wrong with that.
Yeah, absolutely. So B-Rock Bass, is it better this is a good question. Is it better to fish a co-angler in upper level tournaments or fish as a boater in smaller tournaments?
And if you can do a combination of both, I think that would be like the best of both worlds. Because as a boater, you're under a lot more pressure to make decisions on the fly, and you definitely need that experience long term. But as a co-angler, you can learn a ton too if you get with the right guy. I mean, you can learn a lot in 8 hours. So
I think they're both important. I think fishing at your level in small as a boater is more important because you can keep setting up. If you only do the co-angler thing, you're never going to learn what it's like to be the guy or the girl. I mean, the person in charge, the captain, the person that makes the decisions, the person that there's you can't find your style as a boater until you become a boater, right? So, but fishing Strens or BFLs or opens as a co is a great experience. So I'd say fish local as a boater and sprinkle in what you can as a co.
Yeah, no, I think that's a good idea for sure.
Fish Trap Lake, that's up by Cushing.
Yeah,
but
yeah, Hunter, sorry I didn't get back to you. I just got his message on Instagram today. But Hunter, I was up there this spring with my girlfriend for one day. That was the only time I've ever been on that lake. So I've never been there since. I hadn't ever been there in the past. But we caught a lot of fish. I mean, that was more of like I think we were there in May, and so I caught a pile on a thunder cricket that day, kind of in emergent pad stem areas in the afternoon when the sun was getting on them, and then a couple of great big ones on some docks. But I would imagine this time of year it's going to be way different than when we were there in May. I don't know. Maybe the dock bite would be all right. If I were to go there now, I'd probably sample the docks. I'd sample like metal pads that are probably topped out now, and then I'd try and find some offshore stuff. That's probably what I'd do.
Yeah, it's not a big lake. You should be able to do all of them in the day. So
yeah, it was a good lake. We caught a lot.
Yeah, I actually like Chaminade a lot better. I busted some big bags in club tournaments in Chaminade back in the day.
Oh, really?
Right around the corner. Yeah, mostly shallow. Yeah. A lot of those were June tournaments, though, I think. So.
Oh, okay.
Bob, where are you based? Bob is out of Hudson, Wisconsin.
Yeah. I grew up in Egan and now I live in Hudson.
Yeah, but now he's up at his cabin up in northern Minnesota right now. That's where he is now.
Yeah, I've been working from up here.
Any tips for Coronas? Never been on it.
Never been on it myself. I hear there's smallmouth. That's about all I know about it.
Go follow Kent Middlestat on Instagram and slide into his DMs.
Yeah.
All right, so let's kind of jump back. We answered a bunch of questions. Going back to last year in the opens, how typically, I'm sure it changed a little bit, how many days were you practicing and when would you get into town for an open last year?
So I practiced like 3 to 4 days for each one of those. The only one that I practiced longer than that was on Smith Lake. I think I got 5 or 6 days in on Smith. And what I discovered is that was too much for me. And part of that was because the bite was pretty good at Smith. Like Like everywhere you catch spotted bass is basically but whether or not it was over 2 pounds was kind of the bigger deal there. So I ended up having way too much stuff, and I ran around way too much the first day on and it kind of hurt me. But yeah, I'd say 3 to 4 was kind of the right number for me.
Sure. So it hasn't been a big adjustment for you to the elites, although you went from getting like closer to 4 days down to what, like 2.5 for the elites?
Yeah, and this year with COVID, they got like virtual meetings, so we're actually getting 3 full days now.
Okay.
Which is nice. That's about right, I think.
I feel like that is, I talked about this with somebody else. I feel like COVID, the one good thing could be the death of the pre-tournament meeting. Is like, that's like, if I don't ever have to go to another BFL or Bass Nation like pre-tournament meeting with 300 people, that'd be awesome.
Yeah, it's been pretty slick. We get like a YouTube video, and it's about 8 minutes long, and that's it.
Nice, that's awesome.
Yeah.
Because a lot of guys, for the people that don't know, opens have official practices, but they don't have any cutoff. You can literally go there and camp for 2 months leading up to the tournament. And guys do that. Like,
yeah, absolutely. Yeah, like I think some of the Japanese guys last year that were in the running for the elites, I mean, they were there for a month at Grand, that last one. And so for me, that I get it. Maybe for them, they're, coming across seas, but for me, 3 to 4 days was about right.
Yeah, absolutely. The B-Rock, you got a tournament on Coon. I used to fish Coon a lot. I haven't been there in a few years. It's kind of similar. If you go to the east side of the lake, there's a decent opportunity to find some deep fish. Where you can find some of those hard bottom transition areas. Look for that deep coon tail again. I don't know if I'm sure there's got to be milfoil in there now. Some kind of flippable milfoil in that lake, but I haven't been there in so long.
I haven't either. It used to be like my favorite lake, though, growing up when I was fishing club tournaments. That the west side was my favorite, and I would go
shallower side, the docks, the cattails, the reeds on the west side.
Yeah.
Typically, the reeds by the swimming beach on the public ice on the east side is always a safe bet. There's always some fish.
Yeah, and that milfoil changed so much each year on that west side. I mean, some years you could literally like punch matted milfoil like 5 feet of water. Then other times, like you needed to be offshore more, like in that 8 to 12 foot range. But I honestly haven't been there in probably 8 to 10 years.
Same thing. But yeah, it used to be my favorite lake as a kid. Like that's really
it's a good lake.
So you started out like last year. Was it Toledo Bend or Sam Rayburn's first one?
Yeah, Toledo Bend.
And you cashed a solid check there. What were some of your eye-opening, like positive learning moments? Like what talk about the things that like you're planning and things that went well and how it turned like some of that stuff from last season.
Yeah, so each one was kind of unique. Like Toledo, I actually had a pretty tough practice, and I got stuck in a really bad blizzard in Kansas City and actually lost a day and a half of practice. So I think I only had 2.5 days down at Toledo for practice, and it was really tough. And I ended up only having like 2 areas. And what I learned from that tournament is even with a tough practice, it's sometimes not the worst thing in the world, because if you can still find 1 or 2 areas to hunker down into, then you sometimes can still be all right. And that was kind of the trend for me last year that I learned a lot about myself on these bigger lakes, is that I still to this day have not perfected that run and gun technique. Like some guys are really good, like a Brand Thrift or Van Dam, that can pull up to an area, make 5 to 10 casts, move on to the next, and they can do really well. And for me, I do way better when I actually hunker into an area and kind of learn it, whether that's on these bigger reservoirs, you're still looking at like 5 to 10 mile stretches for the most part, but you're not like making long 30-40 minute runs between areas necessarily. And so for me, I've done way better when I can hunker into an area. And that was kind of a trend throughout all of the opens last year. Like when I won, and all my stuff was within like Horse Creek. I don't know if you guys are familiar with Grand, but Horse Creek is like one big general area mid-lake, and that's where all my stuff was. And so for me, that's kind of a learning. I'm still learning how to practice that way, because you want to cover ground in practice, but you also don't want to spread yourself too thin. And I kind of started learning that on the Mississippi River a little bit. When I fished tournaments there, you can definitely spread yourself too thin if you're not careful. And so I don't know, that's probably one of the biggest things I learned last year through the opens.
Yeah. So Sycamore's got a good question that relates. In a 3-day practice, how many spots do you typically have? And in trying to judge, like, how many boats you see around you, and like whether you have to yourself or just kind of what's your typical experience?
Yeah, so in the opens, it's way different than the elites, because you got like more than double the field in the opens. So like in the opens, you almost kind of need more spots than you maybe would in the elites, because there's better chance of guys being on your stuff. But how many spots, man, that's so different depending on the tournament. Like Toledo, like I said, I only had like 2-3 areas. On Smith Lake, I had 15 to 20 different areas that I could pull into. So I don't know. It's hard to say. Like on Champlain, I basically stayed in the North End and primarily in the Inland Sea. And so that, that's still a pretty massive area. But within that area, I maybe had 3 to 5 general spots I was running each day. And for me, like I practice, I don't want to need areas very long to fully learn them. And so I think I never fully know what I'm on until after the first day of the tournament in a lot of cases. I think that's something. I think that's maybe one reason why I've had better day twos. Like all the opens last year, I had better day twos than first day. And then this year in the elites, I've somewhat had that in the last couple of events. I think the last 3 events have had better day twos than day one. And I think one of my problems is I've tried to cover too much water on day one. I've tried to hit like a lot of stuff that I didn't practice, and then on day 2 I settle into an area, and then I do better. So there's a little bit of a trend there.
Nice. So I guess is there anything through 4 or 5 tournaments now applying? I mean, have you kept that same strategy in practice, or do you feel like you've changed and it's not been working? Like in general, right? Like what do you think the biggest difference is between your open season and your elite season this year?
I've tried to stick to the same routine as last year. Florida was a little bit of a weird deal. Like had never been to Florida. I would fish a lot slower if I were to go back. I think you still got to cover a lot of ground in practice, but once you determine a few areas that have fish, like really hunker in Florida is one thing I learned. Like every tournament, everyone has its own little different scenarios. Like Champlain, I practiced entirely wrong. Like I should have practiced more for smallmouth, in my opinion. And I know some guys got pretty good largemouth, but for me, that just wasn't working.
So you don't feel like fundamentally it's been a theme. It's more been small, should have zagged type stuff where you've been just a half step in the wrong direction. That's kind of like, because it's not like you're not at 85th every tournament, right? Like you've kind of been like just a fight or two from where you need to be in a lot of them. So
yeah, what's real interesting about now fishing the elites and all the live coverage, we can go back and watch that after we're out of the tournament. Right. And what I've learned is, not in all scenarios, but in most cases, like I have practiced and or fished the tournament around a lot of the top like 10 to 15 competitors in a lot of in Florida, like those canals that Whitaker fished. I mean, that's right where I was on day one. And I got in and out of there way faster than I should have. I should have just hunkered in. And so that was pretty eye-opening. Canterbury fished the same shoal that I was fishing on Champlain morning of day one, and I got in and out of there too fast. And I think I got one good smaller, and that was it. So that's one thing that's super eye-opening about having live coverage. And I think if there was live coverage in the local tournament, we would be seeing the same thing. I mean, you're probably, if you've been doing this long, if you have somewhat of an idea of where bass live or how to find bass in the lake, but how you fish for them from a presentation standpoint, or whether you zig or zag, is kind of what separates you from doing well or doing mediocre.
Yeah, I definitely feel like St. John's was our super oddball. Like being not in Florida, those extreme wind conditions, the extra days off, the tide not moving, like pulling the water out. I feel like that was
it. Yeah, it was weird. I had one spring down there that I had to myself, actually. It was a pretty small area. And I literally watched 20 to 25 pounds just swimming around me on day two, and I couldn't get a single one to bite. So it's just like, and it's because the water had dropped like 1.5 feet on top of their head. Sure. So there's little scenarios like that as someone that's like following the tournament, those, you see a guy finish in 80th and you think, well, he wasn't on anything or around anything. But there's all these little things that happen throughout a tournament day that can either make or break you. If I figure out a way to get those fish to bite, then maybe you have a day like Patrick Walters did. I think on day two, he had over 20 pounds. And I talked to him about how he was catching them, and it sounded like it was like very similar to how I was doing, but I couldn't figure out how to catch him.
There's a similar story of Polinick, not that we feel bad for him, but on St. Lawrence on the fourth day, he stopped on he caught a couple big ones on day three coming in the river on this flat. And he said he went there on day 4 and you could still see them, but with all the wind, it stirred up so much algae and moss and stuff that you could still see the fish, but he literally present a lure in a manner that a smallmouth would bite it, because it would just get gummed up no matter what he threw.
Yeah, that's interesting. I wonder what spot that was, because him and I started 50 yards from each other on day one, and in the river, like not far from each other. And we caught a couple small ones, and then I actually went back to that area and caught like a 3.5. And then he said like you said, he stopped and caught 2 big ones late on the third day. I wonder if it was that area or not.
Yeah. Does that as a rookie, you pull up and you're 50 yards from a guy that's won there before and it's top 10 time. Is that like, oh, maybe I figured this out this time? Like what's going through your head? Like,
yeah, I mean, it wasn't a bad thing, and then he's such a cool dude. I've gotten to know him pretty well. So I didn't pull right in on him, but we were probably 50 to 100 yards. And we started talking a little bit, and he's like, where'd they all go? And I don't know. And he said, well, you found a good area, because in the past there's been a lot of 3 to 5 pounders sitting here. So that was like, okay, that's good to know. So that's why I stopped there again later on day one and caught a pretty good one there. But yeah, I mean, it definitely gives you some confidence that you can look at a map, you can go out there, you can do your scanning, and you can find productive areas in a place you've never been before. So,
sure. So this kind of, before we get too far behind the questions, Leo's he wants to know your impression on the 2020 Extreme rods.
Yeah, they're good rods. I only have one of them. It's a 7-foot medium heavy casting rod, and I've been throwing a tube on it quite a bit, actually, like on the river, with kind of 14-pound test. It's a little bit of a lighter medium heavy than some of the other medium heavies I've used in the past. Those guides are real rigid. They're actually made by Daiwa, and that's what makes the rod more sensitive. They don't flex at all like your typical guides would, but they're good rods. I mean, I've only been able to use that one though. I would like to try one of their spinning rods. I think that could be like mag rigging or shape head, that sort of thing, where you maybe need a little bit more sensitivity. I think that could be a good setup.
So what are most of the rods that you're running then?
I've always been a big Avid guy. Like even prior to working with St. Croix, I've used their Avid series like religiously. We used to go up to their rod shop every spring, and I'd always buy a couple of them. And then I've been using quite a few of the Legend Elite rods. I've got 3 or 4 of their spinning rods. And then I've been throwing their cranking rods too. They're actually in the Mojo series. They've got a 7.2. I think it's a heavy moderate. So it's like a chatterbait rod. And I've been throwing chatterbait probably more than I ever have in the past this year. I really didn't throw it a lot before this year, but when we went to St. John's and then Gunnersville, I threw it a lot and kind of got real familiar with that rod. I do have one right here that I've been throwing that spin bait on. It's St. Croix. I don't know. Probably won't be able to see it. But it's a 7.6. Maybe you'll be able to see it. 7.6 medium light, extra fast. And I've been throwing out at the St. Lawrence. I was throwing this spin bait quite a bit. Rashi spin bait.
A perch color?
Perch color. Yeah, you can see kind of all the hook rash on that thing. I was throwing it quite a bit out there. But this 7.6 medium light, I mean, I'm not a spin bait or spy bait expert by any means, but it seemed to work really well. You can make really long casts with it, and then when you do hook up, it's got a good bend, parabolic bend, kind of like a crankbait rod would. And so I ended up catching my biggest fish on it out there and fought it for what seemed like forever. And I had one hook right in its nose and was able to get it in. But that's been a really key rod for me the last couple of weeks out in New York.
Yeah, on a spy bait, are you doing straight fluoro or braided fluoro or what's?
So when I went up to Mille Lacs for like half a day before I went out to New York just to kind of mess around with that a little bit, and on Mille Lacs I was throwing all fluoro, thinking that was like going to be what I needed to do, but I couldn't hardly cast really well with it. Like on a long bomb cast, it just wasn't getting out there as far as I wanted it to. So I actually went down to, I think it's 10-pound braid to an 8-pound fluorocarbon leader. And I've been throwing it on that new Suffix 131. It's a little bit different than the 130 or 832. It's more round. It has 13 strands. So it creates a little bit more of a round profile in the 832. And it seems to cast a little better than that other stuff.
Is that something that 132? Are you using that on a lot of things, or just spinning rods, or what do you think where does it excel?
Only used it on this spy bait or spin bait rod so far. It's a sinking braid because it does have one strand of that Gore-Tex in it.
Okay.
So it's not like your preferred like frogging braid necessarily, but it'd be good for like drop shot, Ned rigging, spy bait. I suppose you could punch with it on a higher test if you wanted to. But I'll use that. They got a Pro Mix braid, which is like a braid that's supposed to keep the color longer. And that's a floating braid. Let me throw frogs on that.
Nice. So B-Rock wants to know, what was your first bass boat?
I'll go. My first one was a 1987 Ranger. I think it was I can't even remember, 392 or something like that. It had a 150. I can't remember what kind of engine it was, but I got it in college. That's what we fished all of our college tournaments out of. So
nice.
It's a good platform.
Yeah, the first one that I owned was a 94 Aries 19-footer. But I fished quite a few tournaments out of a 16-foot Rebel with like a 115 or 120 OMC or Evinrude out of it. And like I remember being down in Winona and getting like those giant cruiser wakes and just been like, man, this oof. Like that 16-foot boat. I mean, it would fly, but it was a squirrely little bugger. Like, I can't.
Yeah, I had a 15-foot smoker craft with like a 30 horse on it. And that's what I started at Tiller, and that's what I started club tournaments out of. I probably fished tournaments out of that for like 3-4 years, and then got that Ranger.
Yeah. So the next interesting question, Sycamore, and I think generally like so there is all this live coverage. Do you find yourself adjusting your bait selection?
We can't legally. We cannot watch any of that stuff while we're still in the tournament. So
like you not even the social media clips or anything? Or?
So like if we are on social media posting something and we like come across Bass Nation, we literally just gotta like keep scrolling by it. Like you can't like make an effort to go digging for information or like sit and pause because I mean I'll go back after the tournament and I see they're posting that stuff all the time during the events, and you can't. Technically.
So unless you have a conversation with a fellow angler, you're not going to find out what's going on. So like if you and Caleb are talking, which is completely legal, and he's like, man, I couldn't believe it. I was drop shotting in practice, but today they were smoking a tube, right? That's something you'd be like, all right, maybe I better try that tube tomorrow, right? Or something like that.
Yeah. So like good example, that's day 2 at Champlain. I had caught a few on a jerkbait in practice and kind of knew that was somewhat of a deal, but I talked to Patrick Walters after day 1 and he was asking me how I was doing. Obviously didn't have a good day 1. And he's like, yeah, I think you need to throw jerkbait more tomorrow. He's like, just give it a try, like give it some more time, like than you probably did today. And literally I threw a jerkbait like all day for smallies outside of an hour. And that's how I caught my bag. So
Yeah. So Hunter says he watched the video where you were talking about the Tokyo rig. I assume it's you because I don't think I've ever talked about the Tokyo rig. He said it helped him catch some bass. What
That's
you got?
cool.
Any like what have you liked about the Tokyo rig, or where do you feel like it excels? Or
I think like your bite to land ratio seems to be pretty good because you don't have a weight in the way. They basically get all hook, so that's good. It's a little bit different presentation when you're like pitching wood on the river, and that's kind of what I did a lot with it this spring. It seems to snake through wood really well. And then I actually was throwing it out on the St. Lawrence a little bit for smallmouth. They came out with the Nico hook version, which here at Outcast, and I was throwing it on a spinning rod, and like I had a little barrel weight for the weight, and I was throwing a tube on it actually. And I've been messing around with the Ned rig on it a little bit because they've got the Finesse Nico. It's got the little 2 barbs on the hook.
Sure.
And I've caught some on the Ned, but I actually did better on the tube when I was drifting out on the St. Lawrence. Like I'd throw a drop shot, an actual Ned, and then like if I wanted to like make one more last drift, I would go with that Tokyo rig with the Nico. And I actually caught a 3-pounder the first day on it that I ended up weighing in.
Nice, interesting.
But it seems to have really good bottom contact. Like it gets down there and it stays down there really well. Like I don't know the physics behind it, but it seems to really stay down on the bottom really well.
So like in Minnesota, do you find yourself using it on weed lines and things like that? And then what do you think?
I haven't messed around with it much on weed lines yet.
So you're mostly using it pitching shallow. I mean, majority of it pitching shallow cover is where obviously it can be used other places, but that's where you found it to be best so far.
Yeah, I think if you had like the fish pinned down pretty well in a school, like and you're trying to throw them something different, you could definitely do that. I don't know if it would make like a great search bait necessarily, I think you're better off throwing like a heavy Texas rig if you're doing that. But if you kind of know where they're at and want to maybe clean up, you could throw it like you could throw a wacky rig on it actually, and that works pretty well.
Yeah, interesting. So, what are your thoughts on the ringed? Do you use the ringed DWGs at all?
I do. Yeah, I've started using them this year. They're good. I mean, they do the trick. Have you used them at all?
Yeah, I started using them and I've been super impressed. I've used them in several of my videos this year flipping, and last year I did a couple of videos grass flipping and I had like not like 50% land ratio where I was losing them, and like this year it's been like darn near 100%. Like it's granted, I don't know why, but I'm a believer, and like
I don't know either. It's a good hook too, just on its own. You know, even outside of that ring, it's a sharp hook. So
it's interesting. So I signed up for the email notification because Omnia was out of stock for the EWGs, and a lot of places are honestly right now. And I got the email at 4:30. I ordered like 9 packs for whitefish, so because I know I'm gonna lose a hike up there. And then I posted it in Bass Heads, and within a couple hours they were completely sold out of everything they had in stock again.
Oh man, yeah, they seem to be selling really well right now.
I have heard that you can get them directly at the VMC site, and they are in stock there. So if people are looking, go to the VMC site. Ever fished Crystal and Burtonville? I think we've both fished it a ton.
Yeah, I fished it a lot growing up. I haven't probably been there in like 7-8 years, but
I haven't been there since Sunday.
Is it still good?
It's yeah. I mean, I don't get out there a ton, but I mean, it's probably on a little bit of a downswing as far as like just watching some of the like leagues and stuff to go there. But it's still one of the better lakes. Like I'll take that over Marion any day, in my opinion, as far as a fun lake. But
Marion's always
like a gem of a lake. I think the fact that it has a small access helps keep it relatively good.
Yeah.
It's the access with this COVID. Like back in April, I would go there on a Tuesday at 3 o'clock and have to wait in line to get on the lake.
Wow. Yeah,
so it's kind of like O'Dowd and some of those lakes. It's going to cycle as when people talk about it and a couple big fish get there. You see some 30-pound or 20-some pound bags come out on a Tuesday nighter or something like that, and then it's going to get for a little bit, and then a year, So, but it's a good lake, and there's a lot of stuff to do out there. So I think it's a fun lake to go and practice on and learn. So
yeah, I always liked it.
What state would you recommend to throw at this time of year in central to northern Minnesota?
I mean, this time of year you can really find them grouped up offshore pretty good on certain lakes. I mean, yeah, Minnesota seems like there's always somewhat of a 1-2 punch. Like you can, or maybe 3 different deals. Like you can get on your offshore weed lines. You can, if there's milfoil, that's kind of more your mid-range stuff. And then there always seems to be some sort of dock bite or some shallow bite going, depending on the lake, I guess. But what would I throw? I mean, I don't think I'm giving away any secrets by saying throwing a craw tube on a Texas rig. I mean, that's or I mean, even a ribbon tail worm, a straight tail worm, Senko on a Texas rig on your weed lines.
That's what I was gonna say, because I was gonna say a jig worm or a Texas rig, 7-inch power worm or a yum dinger or something like that. Like cover water, you can fish it through the weeds, you can fish the edges, you can fish shallow, you can fish it deep. It's gonna get
and you can bring that Texas rig up shallow, fish milfoil, fish docks, pads. If you got rice, maybe throw a frog in the mix. But
I don't know. The guys are saying that the stream keeps dropping for everybody, which is weird. And I've noticed like our live viewers will go like, we'll be up 20-some, 30, and all of a sudden it'll plummet to 15, and then like somehow never happened before. So it must be something on YouTube's end going on. So that sucks. So hopefully it stables out, or otherwise we can catch some of this on the replay. And then if not, for those of you who haven't watched before, I do put this out on an audio version. So tomorrow morning, mid-morning, lunchtime, there'll be an audio version, and I'll drop a link down in a pinned comment. So if you want to download the podcast, listen to it, the soothing tones of Bob Downey while you're working out or walking your dog or driving to your next derby,
Yeah.
that's an option as well. So thanks you guys for hopping back on, even though it's a struggle, but I don't think it's anything on my end, and I appreciate you guys hanging in there.
Hope it's not on my end. Might be. I don't know.
Yeah. So yeah, and I don't think it's the streaming service. Yeah, sounds like it's YouTube.
Okay. All right.
So we finished like the northern swing, and I'm guessing I hoped you were going to make a little more hay than you did.
Yeah.
What are your thoughts on the fall swing? Are you excited? Not excited? Which lake are you looking at? Or most, like, what are your thoughts on the remaining 4 or 5 tournaments now, especially now they just added Gunnersville?
Yeah. Well, I'm hoping. I mean, we got St. Clair left up north. That'll be all smallmouth. Man, I would love to get out of there with another good check. Yeah, like you said, what's that?
And points.
Yeah, and points, right? Yeah, I mean, I definitely. St. Lawrence was all right outside of last day. Champlain, man, it reminded me so much of home, and for whatever reason, I could not figure it out until that second day. And I had kind of figured out that deal in practice, but I didn't run it enough on the first day.
Sure.
So wish I would have had that first day back. Beyond St. Clair will be really interesting. I don't know if they're going to set up to be somewhat grinds like Grand was last year where I won. And I don't know if I'll just be able to get up shallow and keep a flipping stick in my hand and kind of be in my comfort zone. That's kind of what I'm hoping. And from talking to guys, it sounds like that definitely could be a possibility. The two that I'm kind of looking forward to that I really don't know if it's going to be really on or not is Chickamauga and Gunnersville. If there's like any sort of shallow grass, like flipping, frogging, punching deal, I feel like I'll at least feel comfortable doing that. That's like one of my favorite things to do in Minnesota in that like September, early October time period is just get up shallow and mats and throw frog around. I don't know if we're going to be there too early for that bite to really be like on fire, or if it's still going to, even if it is going, if it will be a complete grind. I don't quite know.
Sure.
But I would say those two I'm probably most excited about, just because there's going to be grass involved and potential maybe to punch some mats and throw a frog around.
Yeah, I think if you look back at the Costa Championship from a year or two ago, you'll it will confirm your suspicion.
Yeah, I hear you.
Connor says, I saw my story, those Z-Mans. Yeah, I just wanted a few different colors. I'm a big fan. I'm just going to play around with those. He's asking about some baits I ordered from Omnia for whitefish. And I ordered several packs of these hula sticks, which I kind of like these as like a beefed up Ned or as a Nico or a drop shot, just something a little bigger. And then grab some of these, hoping to flip some grass up at whitefish. And
there you go.
In these last weekend
right.
on Seth Fighter's line, he called it.
Yeah, what is that?
It's a Strike King punch bug.
Punch bug.
Yeah, it's a pretty nice little you might.
A little smaller than a craw tube.
It's shorter.
Okay.
A little smaller. So it's like a solid body, ribbed like a craw tube, but solid. And then got like rage pinchers on it. So it's a little smaller. So
I kind of like that.
Yeah. So, and that's definitely was one of the baits that Seth was pitching when he was flipping the grass.
Okay.
He was definitely using his jig, but when he was out in the milfoil, if you guys weren't sure, this is definitely what he was throwing.
Interesting. Yeah, the Ned that I was throwing on the St. Lawrence, it was a smaller one but it had the tentacles on it, like the smaller version of what I think you just had.
Baby Menace or whatever, or
it was the Ned. It was like the Ticklers, but the smaller one.
Yeah, the Tickler Z. I like those for sure. That's I don't know if it's better or the fish like it, but to me, having those little tentacles give me more confidence in my head that there's actually some action.
Yeah,
100% like the Tickler Z for an actual net.
Yeah, that's how I agree. That's how I caught two of my. What's that?
Sorry. He was asking like these max scent generals, and I do think at times they make a big difference. Like If I'm in a tournament, a lot of times I'm going to throw that max set instead of a dinger or something like that. Especially if I feel like I know there's fish there and soaking it. Like day 2 last year on Island Lake, I was skipping a 4-inch wacky general.
Really? On docks.
And we know how tough it was to get bites out there.
Yeah, it was brutal.
I mean, one guy caught limits both days out there. So
yeah, that was his. I mean, it was so brutal.
Yeah. Yeah, that's awesome. Shadow says if my hat starts its own channel, he's out. With my visor. I could make you one if you want, Bob.
Yeah, maybe that's
maybe that's the swagger you need for the Southern.
There are not many visor guys on tour. Maybe that's what I need.
You and Bernie, maybe.
Yeah.
So Serious Angler on Instagram asks, which tourney will have bigger weights? Do you think fork or chick?
I think fork.
100% fork. I think is going to blow away. I think chick's going to be tough.
I think it could be too. Yeah, fork hopefully will be late enough in the year that maybe the bite will be decent. And I think there's just so many big ones there to begin with that.
Yeah, like it's just because it's slotted and the fish don't get weighed in, even though there's a lot of guides and tournament pressure. I think it's a different kind of pressure without getting yanked so much. So I have to tournament. Like I think a Chickamauga at 12, 13 pounds a day probably will be pretty good.
You're right.
Fork, I don't think that's going to hang. So
no.
B-Rock asked, do I have any tournaments coming up? So next week I go up to Whitefish, actually Friday night or Saturday morning. I'm going up to Whitefish to fish the Bass Nation Minnesota TOC, which I've finished second in too many times to count. And so hopefully this is the redemption year for that. And then after that, a week off, and then I go up to Vermilion and fish the Northern Divisional, which I'm super stoked about. That's going to be an awesome tournament. So
yeah, will be. So they're going to still get it on, even with everything going.
There's been not any wavering that I've seen at all from the planning states, from the Bass Nation, and I think they've had some of the other ones.
Have they?
I think like some of the other regions have had theirs. I think, but maybe that we're on a reservation in sovereign nation. I think maybe that'll make it a little easier.
It might. Yeah, those would be fun tournaments.
Yeah, I'm like mildly excited for Whitefish and super stoked for Vermilion. Adderman has a man crush on you. So
what's up, Bill? I like Bill. I was at regionals with Bill a couple of years ago down in Lake of the Ozarks. It was a good time.
You know he lives across the street from me?
Oh, does he? I didn't know that.
Yeah.
Yeah, he's a good dude. I ran into him on Waconia this year. He looks like he said that, but took a kid out there. It was a fun day.
Adam says, which elite event are you least looking forward to in the remaining season?
Oh man, I mean, Santee I think is a wild card.
Mm-hmm.
I actually went there after the Classic this year for a couple days just to kind of ride around and figure out how to navigate that place. There's cypress trees everywhere, and that was more of a pre-spawn deal, so it's going to be nothing like that. But
yeah, you were scouting for the original time.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, so at least I feel somewhat comfortable running around, but I don't know. I mean, that's going to be an interesting deal. I don't know if they get offshore there, or if it's going to be that time of year where you kind of got fish somewhat transitioning back into areas. I mean, I think it'll be one around grass or cypress trees. I don't know that it's going to be a real big offshore deal, but that's kind of a wild card. Talking to Patrick Walters, he thinks guys will still catch them all right, but it's going to be a grind. Like you're probably not going to get much more than 10 bites a day. So,
yeah. So, guys, Ballin, other guys, it seems like YouTube's got it going out. Sounds like refresh and sign back in is the best option. Sounds like something on YouTube's end. Sorry about that. So you mentioned pre-practice. Have you pre-practiced for any events besides Santee?
I've been to Chickamauga. I spent like 5 days on Chickamauga this spring after the Classic, kind of waiting to see what was going to happen with our schedule. And I was stuck, well, kind of somewhat stuck down there. And I just decided to stay for 5 days and had like 5 of the best spring fishing days I've ever had. So that was pretty cool. But it'll be nothing like that. I mean, there was no grass up at the time. And then I've been to Gunnersville with the Classic, never been to Fork. And then I've been to St. Clair one time in college. We went there, but it was in like October, and it was like 10 years ago. So I don't really remember a lot about it.
Yeah. So I think Bill's got an interesting question. I think this is something. So he says, are the elites an old boys network, or are they pretty accepting, or what? How do you feel like the acceptance, or I mean, they're not hazing you, are they, or anything, or?
Honestly, it's been like better than expected, really. And I don't know if that has something to do with this new group of guys that is kind of banded together last year and has continued to this year. But I don't get that sense at all. Like at these campgrounds, I've been invited to dinners with different anglers next door quite often. Like, so everybody's been super welcoming. And I mean, there's obviously guys that are going to network together and help each other out, but that's to be expected. You get guys that pair up, or 2, 3, 4 guys that pair up and share information, but that's always happened. So, no, they've been super welcoming, really. It's been a good experience from that standpoint.
And I've no firsthand experience, but just from what I hear of interviews, and I follow the sport pretty closely, I feel like 3, 4, 5 years ago, that wasn't necessarily the case.
I agree. Yeah. No, I don't have firsthand experience either, like you say, with that, with the elites like 4 or 5 years ago. But yeah, right now it's like, I don't know, everybody's super cool and pretty welcoming.
I feel like guys like Seth and a few other guys that kind of hung around have made comments that have alluded to such that like this is a completely different feeling than it was.
Yeah. I've heard the same thing, and I have no complaints about that. Everybody's been really cool.
Sure. So Connor says, if either one of us could only throw one lure for the rest of our tournament seasons, what would it be?
I mean, this year, yeah, I mean, I don't know if you could throw a jig at St. Clair, but at least in Minnesota, I mean, you feel like you can lock a jig in your hand and do some damage. Around the rest of the country, yeah. I mean, maybe a Texas rig you could do, you could punch with that. You could do a lot of different things with it. But
to me, yeah, 100. I mean, like, I feel like you crossed St. Clair off the list. I was thinking, I'm pretty sure Bob's going to say, I mean, you're going to say an all-terrain jig of some kind, and I'm going to say a jig. Like, I'm going to put a flipping jig, a hybrid, an Arky style jig that I feel like will come through a little bit of everything. I can drag it deep. I like, a scrub or a speed crown on the back of it, and like if I'm going to be a one rod Todd, I'm going to go down with a jig in my hand.
Yeah, and at least I don't know what it's like in the rest of the country, but here in Minnesota, I mean, from late August, September, and October, I mean, that's like what you got to be throwing to get some big bites. I feel like
almost every 6-pounder I've caught in Minnesota has been on a jig. Yeah, I mean, like, were you throwing a jig a bit on Grand when you won?
Yeah, I was mixing in a beaver and a jig. Yeah, That's what I was throwing on Champlain for largemouth. That's what I caught. My one that I did catch over 4 the second day came on an AT jig.
Yeah, you could definitely throw Texas rigs, shadow, and things like that. But like, to me, the beauty of a jig is the efficiency that it brings. If you can get them to bite, you're not fixing worms, you're not doing it, you lock it on there, and like if they're biting it, you're catching them, and you're going to get a big bite. And I think that's the beauty of, I mean, if you're going to really, and I can do more things, I think, with a jig as far as swimming it, stroking it, dragging it. then I can day in and day out. So.
Yeah, as long as you got like the right head shape, you can fish pretty efficiently through most anything.
B-Rock says, what age did you guys start fishing club tournaments?
I started like when I was 13, 14 years old in a junior club. At the time, it was the Minnesota Federation. And I think I did that through age 17. And then when I turned 18, I joined an adult club and did that through really kind of through my college years, and then fished college stuff too. But I don't know what clubs are around Waconia. I mean, there's
club. I forget, which one were you in?
I started out in Lakes area, and then up until last year, I was in Castaways with like Carl and Tim Andy and Steve Rathwitz.
Sure, cool. Yeah, so for me, I'm a little bit older than Bob. They did not have junior program when I was fishing. So I was fishing. My dad fished in Gopher for years, and he fished it since like late 70s, early 80s. He's been in that club until just a few years. And when I was younger, I would practice. Like when I got old enough to like go out and spend all day in the boat, I'd go out and practice club tournaments, and I would travel. As I got a little older, started 10, 12, or maybe 12, 13. I'd start going with them, and then he'd fish a tournament, and I'd be like hanging out at the campsite or whatever. And then like if the resort had a rental boat, I'd go out in the rental boat and go fishing all day. Or if somebody had an extra boat, sometimes they'd let me take their boat out and go trolling motor only, and then I'd start keeping my bass and I'd bring them in and like weigh them, even though I wasn't in the tournament. And I was like pretty good. And then like I don't remember exactly. I think 14 or 15, they finally let me start fishing a little bit. Like it would start out with like, oh, we're short a guy. Can Rich fish this tournament just one time as a non-boater to fill the spot, right? So that we kind of. And then I think when I turned like 15, they let me kind of fish a full season, and so I fished in the adult club. And I think by the time I was 19, I was president.
Oh wow!
Yeah. So I fished that club for years and years, and now. So yeah, I've been fishing the Federation stuff I think I fished my first state tournament in Winona in '97, because I think I qualified all the years in high school, but I never wanted to miss high school football.
Okay.
But when I went to college and I wasn't playing football, I decided that I would skip class and go to the tournament. So my very first one was down in Winona.
Okay. There you go.
Almost every state tournament since then, except for a couple times where I've been double booked on some regionals, so they couldn't make it. So
yeah, it's a good way to start, and it's a good. Honestly, like I'd probably still be doing it if I hadn't had the year I had last year. I mean, that's what I'd be doing. It's a good way to still learn, even if you've been doing it for 15, 20 years.
Yeah, because last year you were still fishing the club.
Yeah,
Bass totally. Nation. You were at the state tournament last year with me. You finished 9th. I finished 2nd, right?
Yeah.
The regional, and you decided to focus on the elites instead of fishing grubby tournaments with me.
Yeah. No, that was a hard decision. I would love to be up under $1 million.
So I'm not sure of clubs in Waconia, B-Rock, but slide into my Facebook or Instagram DMs, and I'll help find somebody for you. Like I know who to talk to get you in the right direction. So yeah. So Connor and B-Rock, you guys should probably follow each other on Instagram.
This is kind of a funny comment.
Yeah.
So maybe you don't know the backstory, but Dom, so day one on Mille Lacs, the year we had the state tournament up there, he was a co-angler, and he just waxed me out of the back of the boat. I think he had like 19 pounds, and I had like
your back graph. Probably dropping him on him behind you. You didn't know it.
And then I think he was with Bill on day 2, and he did well out of Bill's boat, and I think he went to regionals that year. But Dom's a good dude. I've kept in touch with him here and there, and he's a good fisherman, good young fisherman.
I just missed that one. That one makes me angry.
Yeah, I didn't do well. I had a decent day.
A mediocre bag the first day that held me bad, and then I had a pretty monster bag the second day. It just wasn't quite enough. So
yeah.
Um, do you have any plans to pre-practice any of the upcoming events? Or are you just going to do your 3 days?
I'm probably just going to do my 3 days. I mean, after St. Clair, I'm trying to think. I'll have been to all of them outside of Fork.
Okay.
Obviously at different times of the year, but so I'll probably just go and finish the practice that we have.
Cool. And Fork's not big either, but it's also not super easy to navigate. So I know a lot of people complained, or I don't know if complained, but commented at Bass Fest that it wasn't real big, but you couldn't really cover it real fast. And that's, I mean, I've actually fished quite a few times when I was younger, and I would agree with that.
Yeah, that's what I've heard too. That'll be interesting for sure.
Are you fishing anything else, like during the breaks? Are you doing anything? I mean, besides just fun fishing, or you got any other? Are you dipping into local derbies to bankroll?
What's that?
Are you trying to dip into any local derbies to bankroll anything?
Yeah, no, I really haven't. I've thought about it, but I've got enough going on back home to kind of, with work, and then, just try and spend time with family and that sort of thing, friends and family back home. When you're on the road that much, your time back home becomes even a little bit more precious than it was before. So,
Sure.
In the past, I'd be trying to fish a tournament every weekend, and now that's changed a little bit, but that's okay. I'm still out on the water quite a bit, just not in tournament mode.
Sure.
Back home.
Cool. Yeah. So anything else, I guess, that you're excited about, or like new stuff, or is there anything from, like, I guess you talked about like the new Tokyo rigs from VMC. Is there anything else that came out from ICAST that like you've been kind of excited about or trying to work into your arsenal? Or
I think those crossover bands from VMC, they've got the ability to both Nico and Wacky rig with them. I've been using those quite a bit. Those are pretty cool. I think it's a good system. Some of the new DT colors I've been messing around with, I think have some potential. It's one thing I'm trying to do more of is throw a crankbait. Growing up in Minnesota, you catch so many pike on them, I just didn't throw them a whole lot. But it's something I've done a lot more in the last couple of years, especially this spring. I threw a DT6 like the entire classic outside of chatterbait here and there. And at Chickamauga, that's really what I caught a lot of my bigger fish on. But so new crankbait colors. Trying to think what else. VMC's got kind of a cool swim bait head that I've thrown a little bit. They came out with some new colors of the Largo shed, but I haven't really messed around with them much. I've thrown the original colors, and it's a good swim bait. It's a lot more durable than like a Kitech. A little bit different action though too. I really am excited to try that 131 braid a little bit more. I threw it a lot at the St. Lawrence and was very impressed with it. So I'm excited to throw it on, like get some 30-pound and throw it for swim jigs and that sort of thing. I think it's going to be a really good braid.
Sounds like a really good like Kitech braid, and
yeah.
I guess it'd be interesting to see on the finesse stuff, because I guess my one, like, I love everything about braid to floor on spinning rods except for rocks. Like, because like when you snag it, it's really hard to pop it. And now if my braid's sinking, is it going to make it even snag more? Or is it like, I don't know, like around sand and gravel and weeds, I think all in, but in super snaggy, that'd be my only hesitation on that. But
yeah, the 832, if you've used it, that's a sinking braid too. So that's pretty similar. But yeah, I agree. It definitely is not easy to pop off a rock when you get hung.
So it says the 16.5-foot deep V90 good for local. Absolutely, that's a great. As long as it's got a live well for 90% of the tournament lakes in Minnesota and Wisconsin, that's a great boat to fish tournaments out of.
Yeah, I agree.
I mean, if you can set it up where you got a little bit more of a, you see a lot of guys like, or people when they get into it, they'll modify and build a little platform up front, so it's a little bit more like a deck up front, depending on the style you have. That's about the only thing that I would say maybe would be nice to do is just make sure you got a good fishing platform up in the front if it's not there already. So
yeah, get a good trolling motor on there and you'll be just fine.
Yeah. Batman, he's hating on the Bass Cats.
I've been running one the last 8 years.
Was your first one a Pantera? Was it a Saber or what was your
Pantera 2? Yeah. Yep, that's what I fished the opens out of last year. And I mean that to me was, I think yours is similar. Do you have a classic?
I'm a classic, a little bit older style, but yeah.
Yeah, those for a 19-foot boat, in my honest opinion, that it's as good as it gets, and it's about all you need for around here too. And honestly, you can take it on bigger bodies of water too. You can fish mille lacs pretty comfortably in it.
Most of the time, it's pretty good, and then every once in a while, you're like, man, it'd be nice to have a Puma every night.
Yeah, like this year I'm running the Era, and I will say, like out on the St. Lawrence and Champlain, it's definitely been nice to have that extra foot and a half.
Yeah, but like it was interesting. It comes down to like knowing your boat and know how to drive it. Because like I was up at Leech and it blew both days out of the south, and like I made a boy from Walker every day. And most of the guys would like go around Stony Point and head south and hug the shoreline, and I was just like
going
like hammer down. But like if you know how to drive it and like
yeah, you got to be smart about it and take your time when you need to. But sometimes when they're bigger, you can almost run the troughs, and it's almost easier then.
I kind of took it slow until I could get the angle right to go, and then it was pretty easy sailing. But there was a lot of guys that just tried to full send it, and they broke their trolling motors and all kinds of stuff. And it's just like
yeah.
Do you run birds?
Yeah, I do. Mm-hmm.
What are your thoughts on Mega versus regular side imaging?
I think it is better, to be honest. It's a little more clear, a little more crisp, I guess you could say. And I'll run because I'll flip back and forth between I think it's 400 and then 800
or whatever
in Mega. And I don't see myself using 800 a lot, but I'll use 400 if I'm scanning out further, like 200 or something like that. And then when you really kind of want to dial in and get a closer view, like 100 or less, I'll have it on Mega. And I never had the old 360, but I've got Mega 360 this year. And it's pretty cool. It's pretty highly detailed when you get it dialed in. And I won't say it's a deal where every day you go out and it's going to help you catch more fish, but there are certain scenarios where it will.
Yeah. And I would say the Mega is definitely better, but it's not to the point where traditional side imaging is not useful. It's not between seeing a rock pile and not seeing it. It's maybe being able to tell the definition of the rocks, or you might be able to pick up a fish here and there that you didn't see, or to get you a better picture. But I don't think you're going to miss a lot with traditional,
no.
To find detail. You're not going to miss a rock pile. You're not going to miss a rock pile. You're not going to miss a weed clump, right? Obvious things will be fairly obvious. You might just not interpret it in as much detail. I think it's good. And so, if you don't have it, and money's not a big issue, I would make sure you get Mega. But don't if you've got an older Helix that it's junk, I'm not learning. It's still going to tell you a lot. So
yeah, you're dead on. The Mega might help out a little bit if you're looking at individual fish or groups of fish at times, but you're not gonna miss the obvious stuff on the old side imaging.
I think down south where you're scanning ledges and where you're really looking for the fish before you fish them.
Mm-hmm.
probably a bigger deal. But in
Yeah.
Minnesota, it's not very common that you're scanning the fish that you end up catching because they're usually tucked in the weeds. And so I think mega probably up here is a little diminished advantage to compare to some other places in the country.
Yeah, I agree.
Yeah. I did hear the story, Connor, that Seth's grass came off and then they washed up on shore and somebody gave it to Brandon Polnick.
Yeah,
so
that's nuts. I saw that too.
one of them's working, one of them's waterlogged, I think.
Yeah, I think he might use the one that's working or try to.
Yeah, that's what he said. And I said, well, great. Now Polnick's got all Seth's and clear waypoints. So now what?
Right, as if he needed it
I
more.
make sure it's working and put my SD card.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
If you see some guy on like eBay selling Tonka waypoints under a code name, it might be Brandon. So
yeah, right.
So I guess any horror stories, anything like any like super big surprises or things that like shocked you your first year so far, or like what's the most eye-opening thing? You went in, like, has there been a scenario where you like feel like you thought you had an idea of what it would take and then you caught it and then came in and been like, wow, they really caught it?
Eufaula, yeah, day one. Yeah, like I think I had 14 or something, and we were all talking beforehand, and we thought it would take 13 to 14 a day to get a check, and I was sitting in like 60 something with 14 or even more.
Yeah.
So that's to that point, like I kind of knew this, but it's definitely like become more eye-opening with each event is that these guys catch them. Like they are like on another level from the opens. And obviously, I mean, they all qualified to be there. But they are a step above even that open level to a noticeable extent. Like if like even in Florida where the bite was super tough, I mean, those top guys still caught them pretty good. And if you get on any fishery where the bite's halfway decent, they're just going to crush them. I mean, look at Eufaula, St. Lawrence, Champlain. You know, it's pretty. That part has been pretty eye-opening to me. That like you got to catch them every day. Which I've followed the sport long enough to kind of know that, but until you actually live it, then it really hits home.
It's not like the state tournament where you're like, ah, man, that was kind of tough, but I caught 13 pounds, and then you're surprised that you're in the top 10 when you get in.
Yeah. Right.
You go up there, and you're like, that felt pretty tough, and then, man, I'm in 80th place with 13 pounds.
Yeah. The other thing about it is like these guys, like you talk to them, and they'll all say how tough the bite is. Not a one of them will tell you like they're gonna go out and crush them or that they're on fish.
Right.
And then, but they do, like that's what they go do is they go out and catch them and usually catch them pretty good. So that's one thing that's a lot different than the opens where there's a lot more positive dock talk at the open level, and then you see it go the other way on tournament days. Whereas with the elites, there's a lot of like sandbagging, and then they really catch them. So that part's a little different.
At the opens, at the nation, at the club, everybody wins practice. Everybody's like on them, like.
Yeah. So that's been pretty big.
Nice. Have you guys ever ran anything fast and idle? What happened? Like, have you ever hit anything hard, like on plane?
No, I've like bumped into some buoys before idling, like on accident, but I've never like. I don't think I've ever ran in
dam or log or anything on plane.
I mean, I've knocked off lower units. Yeah, I mean, I think I've knocked off 3 or 4 on the river.
Nice.
So, yeah.
My motor came off one time on the river completely. I think that was like a floating deadhead type situation, but that's the only time. Now I've definitely intentionally ran over sandbars many a time.
Oh yeah, I have too. Yeah, the times I've hit my lower unit, I didn't know like stuff was there. But
I've been pretty fortunate to make very good calculated decisions on the river, where I have not smoked a wing dam or a closing dam or a log or a stump.
Yeah, I hit like it was more of like a hard sand drop one time. Took my skeg off pretty good. It was like more of a gravelly sand drop. Yeah. And then one of those sand sharks came up and bit me off. Vermilion, I actually took my lower unit off on Vermilion on a random big boulder out in the middle of a bay that wasn't marked. So that was another spot.
I would say most of mine have been pretty lucky that I've usually, if I've done it taking off.
Okay, yeah.
Versus setting down. Oh, actually, you know what? There was a time on the Watchtower River in my dad's boat.
That was Nashville, right?
In practice, and there's this place going up the Darbone Bayou to get up to the spillway. They call it the S-turns, and it's not marked for crap. But it's, I don't know, a couple boat lengths wide, and it's like these tight S-turns. And if you're off, I mean, you're dead. Like, it's just dumb. I mean, it's just, and I had ran it so many times in practice, and on like the second day of practice, I came back, and I don't know if I just mental lapse, wasn't focused on my line, and I ran right over one of the S's, and I just put a gash about that long in the fiberglass and just raked it to the bed. So that was the first car.
Yeah.
I basically came off plane and I sat down on a series of logs and just like just stumps, like it was bad.
That's good.
So there we go. So we ended a positive note on the street. All right. Well, I think we're an hour, 40 minutes. I think we've covered most everything. I think most people got to ask what they wanted to ask. So it's Bob Downey Fishing on Facebook and Bob Downey _ on Instagram. I have those linked down in the description below, so you guys can click on those. Anything else people should follow you on, or anything?
No, just those two. I haven't really gotten into the YouTube deal, but
don't do it. It sucks.
Yeah, no, I appreciate you having me on. It's been fun to chat with you and talk about the season, and good luck in your next two events. Yeah,
same for you. Hopefully, I'd like to see you make some day 3 cuts and make a little noise, and make us proud. We'll be watching. So
appreciate it.
All right. As always, hey, thanks everybody. Make sure you watch the replay, subscribe, comment. Let me know what you thought of the stream. I know there was some troubles tonight. Like I said, there will be the replay available. There will be the audio version. As always, I'm here to help you catch more bass and suck less.
See you guys.